Hello and welcome. You are here tonight for something simple, something calm, something slow, something that doesn't ask much from you. The day is over now. You've done enough. The noise of the day can fade. The thoughts of the day can soften. There is no work to do. There is nowhere to be. There is nothing urgent left. Right now, there is only rest and the sound of words, soft words, ordinary words, boring words, words that are not sharp, words that do not demand, words that simply drift, like dust floating in a beam of light, like ripples moving across still water, slow, gentle, predictable. And these words tonight are about something ordinary, something plain, something almost invisible. The post office. Yes, the post office. The story of letters. The story of stamps. The story of waiting in line. The story of something that has always been there. Something steady. Something unchanging. Something boring enough to help you relax. This is not a story of excitement. Not a story of drama. Not a story of heroes or battles. This is a story of slow things. A story of paper, of ink, of seals, of stamps, of waiting, of walking, of carrying. And tonight, I will take my time, step by step, word by word, like a letter moving slowly through the world. And as I do, you can let go. You can rest. You can drift. And if sleep comes, let it come. Because this story does not need your attention. It does not need your focus. It does not need you to remember. It is only here to carry you gently. From wakefulness, to stillness, to rest. Long before there were phones. Long before there was email. Long before there were computers. There was still the need to send a message. One person needed to reach another. One village needed to reach another. One king needed to reach another. But how? There was only one way. Someone had to carry the words. And in ancient Egypt, this was how it began. The Nile River flowed. The sun burned hot on the sand. The fields stretched green after the flood. And in small rooms scribes sat. Scribes with sharp reed pens. Scribes with ink made from soot and water. Scribes with sheets of papyrus. Papyrus made from tall reeds cut by the river. Thin strips sliced carefully, laid in rows, crossed with other rows, pressed together, dried under the sun. A sheet, a page, a place to hold words. The scribe dipped his pen. He leaned close. He wrote carefully, word by word, line by line. Sometimes it was a record of grain. Sometimes it was a list of taxes. Sometimes it was a message for the king. But once the words were there, they had to move. The papyrus was rolled into a scroll. The scroll was tied with string, sometimes sealed with clay, sometimes sealed with wax. And then it was handed to a messenger, a man, often poor, often young, often strong enough to walk for miles. He carried the scroll, sometimes on foot, sometimes on a donkey, sometimes on a horse, step after step, hour after hour, day after day. The scroll bounced at his side. The road stretched long. The sun rose. The sun fell. The moon rose. The moon fell. And still the messenger walked. Through dust. Through heat. Through wind. Through silence. Each step carried the words. Each mile carried the thoughts. From one place to another place. It was not fast. It was not easy. But it was steady. It was enough. Sometimes the messenger was part of a larger system. The king of Egypt needed news from far away. He needed to know about grain. He needed to know about labor. He needed to know about enemies. So the king created messengers, official messengers, trusted messengers. They carried scrolls sealed with the king's mark. No one else could open them. No one else could break the seal. And if someone tried, the punishment was harsh. Because the words of the king were sacred. They were heavy. They were dangerous. So the messenger walked, and walked, and walked. The desert stretched wide. The sand shifted. The wind blew softly. The messenger carried water. He carried bread. He carried dried dates. Step by step. One foot in front of the other. Always forward. And in this way, words traveled across Egypt. From the Nile to the desert. From the temple to the village. From the palace to the quarry. Words moved. Slowly. Patiently. Quietly. And so, the first post office was not really a building. It was not a place with a counter. It was not a place with boxes and stamps. The first post office was a man walking down a dusty road. A man with a scroll. A man with a purpose. Quiet. Steady. Boring. But enough. Now, let's leave the hot sands of Egypt. Let's step across deserts and rivers. Let's step into a different land. A land between two great rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. This land was called Mesopotamia. It was old, very old, older than most kingdoms we know. Here, the soil was rich. The rivers flooded. The fields gave grain. And people built cities. You're Babylon. Tall walls. High towers. Busy markets. Priests and kings. Farmers and merchants. And in these cities, people still needed to write. They still needed to record. They still needed to send messages. But they did not use papyrus. There was no papyrus here. Instead, they used clay. Clay was everywhere. Soft clay by the riverbanks. Wet clay shaped by hands. So they took the clay. They pressed it flat. They shaped it into small rectangles. Smooth surfaces. Ready to hold words. And then, they wrote. But not with letters like ours. Not with flowing lines. They wrote with wedges. Tiny wedge marks. Pressed into the clay with a reed stylus. One wedge. Then another. Then another. This writing was called cuneiform. The first writing system of the world. A system of small marks. Of angles. Of triangles. The scribe pressed carefully. Row by row. Line by line. The clay tablet filled with symbols. And when the message was finished, the clay tablet was left to dry. Sometimes dried in the sun. Sometimes baked in a kiln. Art. Heavy. Solid. A message written in clay. A message that could last for thousands of years. A message that even today archaeologists still find. Still read. Still touch. But once the tablet was finished, it had to travel. And this was not easy, because a clay tablet is heavy. It does not fold. It does not roll. It does not bend. It must be carried as it is. So a messenger came. A man with a bag of leather, or sometimes a wooden box, inside the tablet. Heavy, fragile, important. The messenger lifted it. He placed it carefully in his bag. He closed the bag. He tied it shut. And then he walked, or rode a donkey, or rode a horse, slowly, steadily, carefully. Because if the bag fell, the clay might break. If the bag was dropped, the tablet might shatter. So every step mattered. Every turn mattered. Every bump in the road mattered. The messenger carried the weight. He carried the king's orders. He carried the merchant's contract. He carried the farmer's debt. Step after step, hour after hour, mile after mile. The sun rose, the sun fell, the moon shone, the stars wheeled overhead, and still, the messenger carried the clay. Imagine him, a man in a simple robe, sandals on his feet, a bag hanging heavy at his side. The road is dusty, the air is dry. Sometimes the wind blows hot, sometimes the wind blows cool. He passes farmers in fields. He passes traders with carts. He passes children playing near the river. But he does not stop. He keeps walking. He keeps carrying. Because the tablet must arrive. Sometimes he carries one. Sometimes he carries many. A bag full of clay. Each one heavy. Each one fragile. His shoulders ache. His legs ache. But still he walks, because in this time, messages were rare, and each one mattered. What was written on these tablets? Not stories, not poems, not love letters, not yet. Most were records, simple records, plain records, a list of sheep, a list of grain, a list of workers, a list of payments, over and over. The same details, the same accounts. One tablet might say, 2 jars of oil, given to the temple, on this day. Another tablet might say, 3 men, working in the field, for 7 days, over and over, simple, plain, ordinary. And yet, they mattered, because without them, no one could remember. Without them, no one could prove. Without them, no one could trust. So the clay held the words, and the messenger carried the clay, from the scribe to the temple, from the merchant to the king, from one city to another city. Think of how slow it was. The scribe pressing wedges, each mark taking time, each line taking effort, then drying the clay, waiting for the sun, waiting for the heat, then the messenger lifting the weight, step by step, hour by hour, day by day, so slow, so heavy, so steady. But this was enough, because life itself was slower, because the world itself was slower, because people expected waiting, and in that waiting, there was patience, and in that patience, there was calm. And so, the story of Mesopotamian tablets is not exciting. It is not dramatic. It is not thrilling. It is plain. It is steady. It is slow. A man, a bag, a clay tablet, a dusty road, one step, then another, and as you picture him walking, as you imagine the weight of the clay, as you hear the sound of sandals on the road, you may find your own thoughts slowing. You may find your own body softening. You may find your own eyes growing heavier, because the story of clay tablets is a boring story, a quiet story, a steady story, and that is why it is the perfect story for sleep. Imagine for a moment the wide, sunlit plains of Persia. The air is warm, shimmering with heat, yet there is movement on the horizon. A rider appears, his figure slowly growing clearer. He is not galloping wildly. Instead, he rides at a steady, measured pace. His mission is important, but it is not frantic. His horse breathes heavily, strong, trained, ready to carry messages across the empire. This is Persia thousands of years ago, and what you are seeing is not just one man. It is part of a great system, a carefully designed chain of riders, stations, and roads. The Persians understood something that few before them had fully mastered: the importance of connection. Empires grow vast, cities spread wide, and rulers need to know what happens in lands far away. Messages must travel not in days or months, but in hours. And so, the Persians built something remarkable, a relay system of couriers known as the Royal Road Network. The Royal Road stretched across almost 1,700 miles, from Sardis, near the coast of modern Turkey, all the way to the great Persian capital of Susa. Imagine that distance, mile after mile, desert after desert, mountain after mountain. And yet, the Persians made it passable, predictable, and dependable. Along this road, at regular intervals, they placed stations. Small outposts, sometimes little more than a shelter, water, and fresh horses. But each one was vital, each one was part of the heartbeat of the empire. Now picture this scene in your mind. A rider approaches a station. Dust clings to his clothing, his horse is lathered with sweat. The courier does not stop for rest. He does not even slow down. Instead, he swings off one horse, hands the message to the next rider, and watches as the new horse and rider disappear into the distance. It happens quickly, smoothly, almost silently. The message does not pause. It moves on, uninterrupted, as if carried by the wind. This system allowed messages to cross the entire empire in just 7 days. 7 days to travel what would have taken months on foot. Herodotus, the Greek historian, marveled at this system. He wrote, "Neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor darkness of night prevents these couriers from completing their appointed course with all speed." A phrase that would later inspire the motto of modern postal services. But let us slow this down. Let us linger with one rider on one stretch of the road. The sun begins to set, the sky painted in oranges and pinks. The rider breathes deeply, feeling the steady rhythm of the horse beneath him. In his bag under leather straps lies a message. A simple piece of parchment, perhaps, but more than parchment, it is connection, authority, order. Perhaps it carries the decree of the king. Perhaps it holds news of battle. Perhaps it simply tells of supplies. Whatever the content, it matters. The road stretches endlessly ahead, a ribbon of dust. The rider sees small stones by the path, little flowers blooming between cracks, shadows growing long. He hears only the sound of hooves, steady, steady, steady. There is no rush, and yet there is purpose. Time seems to slow, the mind drifts, and still the journey continues. At the next station, another rider waits. He leans against the wooden post, half drowsy, yet alert. His horse shifts its weight, swishes its tail. The rider's eyes scan the horizon, waiting for the faint shape of his fellow courier. And then it appears. A speck, a figure growing larger. The handoff is swift, almost wordless. A nod, a gesture, a shared understanding. The message goes on. And so it happens again, and again, and again. The empire breathes through these riders like blood moving through veins. The stations are the heartbeat, the horses the lifeblood, the couriers the steady rhythm. Persia remains united not only through armies or kings, but through this constant, invisible web of communication. Now close your eyes and imagine yourself not as an observer, but as the rider. Feel the leather reins in your hands. Hear the creak of the saddle. Smell the dust in the air, the faint sweat of the horse. Ahead, the horizon stretches wide. Behind you, the past. In front of you, a message that must be delivered. Your world is simple, focused, calm. One step, one hoofbeat, one station at a time. As the night falls, the stars emerge above the Persian road. The couriers do not stop. Some stations have torches burning, faint fires glowing in the distance. Riders change, horses rest, but the message does not sleep. It continues like a whisper in the darkness, carried forward, always forward. The system itself feels almost alive, like a great organism stretching across the empire. The couriers are its heartbeat, steady and sure. Each rider knows he is part of something bigger. He may not know the content of the message, but he knows its importance. And in that knowledge there is a quiet pride. In time, others would copy this idea. Rome would build roads, empires would create couriers, kings would establish messengers. But Persia was among the first to weave distance into unity, to turn empty miles into living connections. And as you drift deeper into rest, you might imagine those endless hooves, carrying whispers across the desert, steady, 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 like the calm rhythm of your own breath. The story now carries us westward into the heart of the Roman world. Picture the Roman Empire at its height. Cities buzzing with markets, villas resting on hillsides, legions marching across frontiers, and above it all, an emperor who needed to know what was happening, not just in Rome but in every corner of his vast domain. Rome, unlike Persia, did not just rely on couriers and stations. It built roads. Roads that were more than dirt paths. Roads that were stone, layered, engineered, designed to last. Even today in parts of Europe, fragments of Roman roads still remain. Straight, solid, and carefully placed, they were built not for wandering but for directness. The Romans had a saying, "All roads lead to Rome." And in many ways that was true. Now imagine yourself standing on one of these Roman roads 2,000 years ago. Beneath your feet are heavy stones carefully fitted together. The road is slightly raised, with ditches along the sides for water drainage. Mile markers stand at intervals, carved stone pillars telling you how far you are from Rome. Along this path, messages travel, carried by couriers on horseback or on foot, part of a system known as the cursus publicus, the Roman state's courier network. The cursus publicus was more than a mail system. It was the lifeline of the empire. Established by Augustus, the first emperor, it allowed messages, military orders, and official decrees to move quickly. Relay stations, much like those of Persia, were set along the roads. Fresh horses waited. Riders were ready. At each stop, the mail pouch would be passed on, and the journey would continue. Think about it. From Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Syria, messages could travel across thousands of miles. They moved faster than most people could travel in their lifetime. A letter written in the eastern provinces might reach Rome in a matter of days. The empire, though vast, felt connected, almost intimate, because of this network. But let us slow down and travel with one courier. It is dawn. The air is cool, the sun just beginning to rise over the hills. A rider tightens the straps of his sandals, checks the harness on his horse, and ties the leather bag containing the emperor's message. He mounts carefully, feeling the familiar weight of the saddle. Ahead stretches the road, long and straight, vanishing into the horizon. As he begins, the sounds of the city fade. Soon it is only hooves striking stone. Clip-clop, clip-clop. The rhythm is steady, hypnotic, calming. Along the road, villas stand with olive groves, fields of wheat, shepherds guiding flocks. Life moves slowly, but the courier moves with purpose. He carries not his own words, but the words of the empire. At the first relay station, he dismounts quickly. A stable boy leads his tired horse away, while another rider is already mounting a fresh horse. There are no long greetings, no wasted moments. A nod, a handoff, a leap into the saddle, and the message moves on. Day after day, night after night, this process repeats. The Romans were meticulous in their organization. Messages were marked with seals, wax impressions stamped with symbols of authority. Only the right eyes could open them. The pouch itself was often bound tightly, so no one could tamper with it without being noticed. The emperor needed to trust this system, for it carried knowledge of war, politics, supplies, and taxes. Imagine the scale: thousands of couriers, countless horses, a chain of roads stretching across continents. The hum of an empire, kept alive not only by soldiers or governors, but by the steady passing of parchment and wax from hand to hand, station to station. Now picture the courier at dusk. The sky above turns a soft purple. Shadows lengthen across the fields. The air cools, scented faintly with pine from the forests ahead. The rider leans forward slightly, urging the horse onward. He does not need to wonder if the road is safe. It is Roman-built, patrolled, dependable. Every stone beneath the horse's hooves was placed with care, perhaps by soldiers decades ago, their labor now guiding the empire's heartbeat forward. At night, torches are lit at some stations. Inns nearby offer food and rest for traveling officials. But the message itself does not rest. Even when one rider sleeps, another is awake, carrying the pouch further along. The chain is unbroken. The empire is never silent. You might wonder, what about ordinary people? Did common citizens use this system? The truth is, the cursus publicus was mostly reserved for the state. But still, the presence of roads made communication easier for everyone. Merchants sent letters by trusted travelers, families passed messages through soldiers, and traders carried news with goods. The roads themselves became rivers of communication, flowing with words, goods, and stories. Slow down again. Imagine the courier riding through a Roman forest. The trees stand tall on either side, the air cooler here, birds singing softly in the branches. The road cuts straight through, unbending, unwavering. Every so often, the rider passes a milestone, solid, unmoving, a reminder that Rome has touched even this quiet place. He feels both small and important. Small because the empire is vast. Important because he carries its voice. As the journey continues, he passes bridges, arches of stone spanning rivers. The sound of water echoes beneath. Sometimes he rides through tunnels carved into hillsides, the air damp and echoing. Each step forward is steady, calm, inevitable. The Roman Empire eventually faded. Its great roads crumbled, its stations went quiet, and its couriers slowed to a stop. The world entered what we call the Middle Ages, a time of castles, kingdoms, and long, winding histories. Yet even in this world of knights and kings, messages still needed to travel. Words still had to move. Secrets, orders, and simple news had to find their way from one place to another. Imagine a medieval castle, perched high on a hill. The stone walls rise tall and gray, banners fluttering in the cool wind. Inside, a noble sits at a long wooden table. A candle flickers beside him. He dips his quill into ink, scratching words onto parchment. The letter is short but important. Perhaps it commands soldiers to gather. Perhaps it arranges a marriage alliance. Perhaps it simply asks for grain and supplies. When the letter is finished, wax is melted, dripped carefully onto the fold, and pressed with a seal. The seal is a mark of trust. Without it, the message might be doubted. With it, the words are official, binding, and recognized. Now the message must leave the castle walls. But how? In the Middle Ages, the system was not as polished as Rome or Persia. Roads were rough, forests thick, and travel dangerous. Bandits roamed, storms struck, rivers flooded. Yet messengers still rode. They mounted horses, cloaks drawn tightly around them, and carried letters across fields, valleys, and forests. Picture one such messenger. It is early morning, mist rising from the grass. He rides alone, his horse moving steadily along a dirt track. The letter is tucked safely into his pouch. The road is uneven, stones jutting up, mud sticking to hooves. Birds call from trees, the sound of water trickles nearby. There is no speed here, only persistence. Step after step, mile after mile. At times, the messenger passes through villages. People pause their work to look at him. Farmers rest their tools, children point, dogs bark. The rider does not stop. His mission is clear. Beyond the village, the land grows quiet again. Only the sound of hooves and the creak of leather fills the air. In monasteries, another kind of message keeper worked tirelessly, the monks. Monasteries were not only places of prayer but also centers of writing, copying, and recording. Imagine a scriptorium, a long hall filled with wooden desks. Monks sit quietly, heads bent, quills scratching on parchment. They copy not only holy texts but sometimes letters, chronicles, and histories. In their careful hands, words were preserved and shared. A monk writes by candlelight. The room is cold, his robe thick, his hands steady despite the chill. Each letter he forms is deliberate, beautiful, like art. Outside, the world may be noisy with battles or feasts, but here, inside the monastery, silence rules. Words move from one parchment to another, carried not by horse or rider, but by ink and patience. Still, kings and nobles needed faster means, and so they relied on heralds and royal messengers. These were trusted men, sworn to deliver words with accuracy. They rode with authority, sometimes carrying banners or coats of arms to show their connection to power. If a messenger arrived at your gate, you listened, for his words carried weight beyond his own voice. Imagine now a castle receiving such a rider. Hooves echo on the drawbridge, the gates creak open, guards step aside. The rider dismounts, bows, and hands the sealed letter to the lord or lady of the hall. The letter is opened carefully, the seal inspected, the words read aloud by a scribe. A hush falls across the hall as the message is spoken. News has arrived and everything might change because of it. But messages did not only travel by land. In some places, pigeons were trained to carry small notes. Their wings beat quickly, their flight direct. Imagine a tiny scrap of parchment tied to a bird's leg. The bird rises into the air, circles once, and then flies straight toward its home. Faster than any horse, lighter than any rider, it cuts through the sky. A small living courier. Other times, bells themselves were used as messengers. A village church bell rang, its sound carrying across fields. One tone might call for prayer, another for gathering, another for alarm. People listened and they understood even without parchment or seal. Sound itself became a kind of message ringing out over the medieval landscape. Now let us walk with one more messenger. Night has fallen. The moon glows faintly through clouds. The rider's torch flickers in the wind, casting long shadows along the path. Owls call softly from trees, a fox darts across the road. The rider feels the weight of the letter in his pouch. His horse breathes steadily, hooves crunching on gravel. Each mile brings him closer. Each mile is part of the invisible web that binds the kingdom together. Though the Middle Ages lacked the vast networks of Rome or Persia, communication still flowed. It was slower, more fragile, more dependent on trust. A single rider might be delayed by storms, a single letter lost in mud. And yet the system endured. Castles rose and fell, battles were won and lost, but always, somewhere, someone was carrying a message. As you rest now, you might imagine those long winding roads. Riders moving slowly through misty fields, monks copying lines by candlelight, bells ringing across valleys, pigeons darting through the sky. The world was quieter then, slower, more uncertain. Yet even in that uncertainty, words found a way to travel. Steady, patient, inevitable. The Middle Ages were not only the age of knights and kings, but also of quiet rooms filled with parchment, ink, and patient hands. Beyond the clatter of swords and the echo of hooves, there existed another kind of messenger, one who did not ride but who wrote. The monasteries of Europe became the keepers of words, the silent couriers of knowledge. Picture, if you will, a monastery high on a hillside. Its walls are thick stone, weathered by centuries of rain and wind. Bells toll softly in the distance, calling monks to prayer. Inside, the air is cool and still, carrying the faint smell of wax, wood, and old parchment. A single candle flickers in the scriptorium, the room where monks work to copy texts. In this room, long wooden desks line the walls. Each desk holds sheets of parchment, pots of ink, and sharpened quills. Monks sit in silence, bent over their work. The only sound is the faint scratching of quills across parchment, a soft, steady rhythm, like a whisper of history being preserved. These monks copied everything from sacred texts to chronicles of kings, to letters of scholars. Their work was slow, deliberate, and filled with care. Some even decorated the letters with brilliant colors and gold leaf, turning words into art. Imagine one monk tracing the shape of an illuminated letter, perhaps the first letter of a psalm or a royal decree. His brush moves carefully, layering blue and red pigments. He pauses, breathes, and continues. Each page takes hours, days, sometimes weeks. But when finished, the book or letter becomes something lasting, something that could travel across centuries. Now let us follow one such manuscript. A scribe finishes his work late at night. He ties the pages together with a strip of cloth, seals them, and hands them to a messenger. The messenger, a lay brother, sets out at dawn. He walks along dirt paths, carrying the manuscript tucked safely inside a leather satchel. Step by step, he moves through fields, over streams, across narrow bridges. Perhaps the journey takes days. Along the way, he sleeps in small inns, prays in village churches, and always guards the manuscript closely. At last, he delivers it to another monastery, or perhaps a noble household. There, another scribe will read it, copy it, and send it onward. In this way, knowledge spread, not quickly but steadily. Words did not race like Persian couriers or Roman riders. They drifted slowly like seeds on the wind, planting ideas across Europe. Meanwhile, in castles, another form of message-keeping unfolded. Within high stone walls, lords and ladies relied on scribes and clerks to record agreements, land grants, or treaties. These were written on parchment, sealed with wax, and stored in wooden chests. A single document could mean the difference between war and peace, poverty and wealth, loyalty and betrayal. Imagine sitting in a great hall of a castle. Tapestries hang from the walls, torches flicker along the stone. At a long table, a scribe dips his quill into ink, copying carefully the words spoken by a noble. His handwriting is neat, the Latin precise. Beside him, a wax seal rests, ready to mark the finished parchment. Once sealed, the letter is handed to a trusted messenger, a knight, a herald, or even a young boy sent on horseback. The gates creak open, and the writer vanishes into the night, carrying the sealed words into uncertain lands. Sometimes messages were not written at all but spoken by heralds. These were official messengers who stood in marketplaces or castle courtyards, reading aloud the words of kings and lords. Their voices carried over crowds, declaring news, laws, or commands. Imagine the sound of a herald's voice echoing against stone walls, the people pausing to listen, the message spreading from ear to ear. And yet, despite all these methods, the work of monks remained unique. They were not only couriers of words, but guardians of memory. Without them, much of ancient knowledge might have vanished. Scrolls from Greece, letters from Rome, scriptures from the early church, all were preserved in their careful hands. Let us walk again into a monastery library. The shelves are wooden, the books chained to the desks to prevent theft. Each book is heavy, bound in leather, filled with pages of parchment. A monk runs his fingers along the spines, choosing one carefully. He carries it to a desk, opens it, and begins to read. The words on the page are not hurried. They invite patience. Each line is savored, each phrase considered. This is communication not in haste, but in stillness. Outside, storms may rage. Kingdoms may fight. Castles may burn. But inside the monastery, the quiet work of words continues, steady and unbroken. As you rest tonight, imagine the calm rhythm of those quills. Scratch, scratch, pause. Scratch, scratch, pause. A monk leans closer to his page, adding a flourish to a letter. Another monk turns a page, the parchment rustling softly. Together, they create a chorus of silence, a music of patience. And just as their words float across centuries, let your thoughts tonight flow gently, calmly, unhurried. No rush, no fear. Only the slow, steady work of time carrying you deeper into peace. The quiet scratch of quills in monasteries endured for centuries. But then, slowly, Europe began to change. The Middle Ages gave way to a new age of curiosity, exploration, and rebirth. It was the Renaissance, a time of artists, thinkers, merchants, and explorers. And in this time, a great invention appeared, one that would change the way messages spread forever: the printing press. Close your eyes and imagine a small workshop in Mainz, Germany in the mid-1400s. Wooden beams overhead, the smell of ink thick in the air. Men bend over a heavy wooden machine, its gears creaking as it lowers a press onto a page. When the press is lifted, a sheet of paper lies beneath, covered with rows of letters, sharp, clear, uniform. Dozens of copies can be made, then hundreds, then thousands. Before this invention, words traveled slowly by hand, one page at a time. Now, with the press, a message could multiply, spreading faster and farther than ever before. Picture a scholar holding one of the first printed books. The pages feel crisp, the ink still faintly damp. He turns them carefully, marveling at how the letters look the same on every page. Unlike handwritten manuscripts, which varied from scribe to scribe, this text is exact, consistent, reliable. Knowledge has found a new way to travel. And it was not only books. Letters, pamphlets, and broadsheets began to flow across towns and cities. Imagine a sheet nailed to a church door, words printed boldly for all to see. Travelers read them, merchants discussed them, ideas spread like fire. But still, the art of the letter remained important. In Renaissance Europe, letters were not just messages, they were treasures. People wrote with care, choosing words like jewels. A letter might be folded neatly, sealed with wax, and sent across mountains and seas. Merchants used letters to arrange trade, scholars to share discoveries, lovers to whisper across distance. Let us follow one such letter. It is written in Venice, a bustling city of canals and ships. The writer dips a quill into dark ink, his handwriting looping elegantly across the page. He writes of goods, of spices arriving from the east, of ships setting sail for distant lands. When the letter is finished, he folds it carefully, presses a seal, and gives it to a courier. The courier boards a ship bound for Florence. The letter travels across water, the waves rocking the vessel gently. The salty wind blows across the deck, the sails creak, gulls cry overhead. Days later, the letter arrives in another city, where it is delivered to a merchant's home. A servant places it on the table, and at last it is opened. Words written in Venice now shape decisions in Florence. Trade flows, lives change, all because of a letter. Meanwhile, in the courts of kings and queens, letters carried power. Monarchs corresponded with each other, sending carefully worded notes sealed with elaborate crests. Messengers carried them by horse, by carriage, sometimes even by ship across dangerous seas. These letters could make alliances, declare wars, or end conflicts. Now imagine the court of Queen Elizabeth I. A messenger arrives, bowing deeply, presenting a sealed parchment. The queen breaks the seal, unrolls the letter, and reads. Around her, courtiers wait in silence. The words on the page will shape the future of a kingdom. But it was not only rulers and merchants. Ordinary people too began to write more. The printing press had lowered the cost of paper and ink, making it easier for common folk to send notes, to keep diaries, to record their lives. In small villages, someone might write to a relative in a distant town, asking about harvests, births, or news of sickness. Each letter, no matter how humble, carried meaning. During the Renaissance, exploration stretched outward as well. Ships crossed oceans carrying not just goods but letters. Imagine a sailor in the New World, writing by lantern light in the cramped cabin of a ship. His handwriting is rough, the ink smudged by the rolling waves. He writes of strange lands, unfamiliar animals, vast forests. He seals the letter, and weeks later, it is carried across the Atlantic to Europe. There, it is read with wonder. The world was growing larger, and yet, through letters, it also felt closer. Ideas traveled faster. News spread more widely. The printing press gave strength to voices, and letters gave them intimacy. Let us return for a moment to the workshop of the printer. The press lowers again, pressing ink onto paper. A boy gathers the finished sheets, stacking them neatly. Outside, the city hums with life. Merchants bargain in the marketplace, gondolas glide through canals, bells ring from towers. Among it all, words now move faster than ever before. As you imagine this, let the rhythm of the press guide your thoughts. Down, press, release. Down, press, release. A steady beat, like the heart of communication quickening. No longer a whisper, but a voice spreading outward, touching every corner of the Renaissance world. And so knowledge, trade, love, and politics all found new speed. Letters still carried personal words, but now pamphlets carried public ones. A single idea could cross a continent, and a single printed page could spark revolutions of thought. Tonight, as you rest, imagine those ships sailing, those presses printing, those messengers writing. Imagine the slow yet steady expansion of words across oceans and kingdoms. And let that calm sense of connection carry you gently into sleep. The Renaissance gave Europe its press, its artists, its explorers. But as the centuries passed, a new question arose. How could messages move more quickly, more reliably across growing nations? People wanted faster letters, clearer systems, safer routes. And so began the age of stagecoaches and postal roads. Close your eyes and picture a long road stretching across the countryside. Dust rises as wooden wheels turn, creaking with each rotation. Horses snort and pull, their hooves striking the dirt in steady rhythm. A stagecoach rattles forward, painted bright, carrying passengers, and in its locked compartment, a bundle of letters. The air is cool in the morning. Farmers wave as the coach passes by. Inside, passengers sway with each bump, while the driver snaps his reins and calls to the horses. Behind them, in a leather sack, are messages from faraway places. Some are business contracts, some are notes to family, some are love letters sealed in wax. Each one is precious, and the coach is their only path forward. In the 1700s and 1800s, governments realized the importance of the mail. Kings and parliaments created organized postal services. Roads were improved, maps drawn, milestones placed. Post houses were built at intervals along the routes, where tired horses could be changed for fresh ones, keeping the coaches moving day and night. Imagine a post house at sunset. The sky glows orange, the smell of hay drifts from the stables. A stagecoach pulls in, wheels muddy, horses panting. A boy rushes forward to take the reins, while stable hands bring out a new team. The driver stretches his arms, tired from the long road. Inside, passengers step down to stretch their legs. But the letters do not rest. They are quickly transferred, checked, and placed onto the next coach. Time matters. People are waiting. For the first time, an ordinary person could send a letter with some confidence that it would arrive in days or weeks, not vanish along the way. The post became part of daily life. Picture a small town in England. A young woman sits by candlelight, writing to her brother who has gone to London for work. She writes of the harvest, of neighbors' gossip, of her parents' health. When she finishes, she folds the paper neatly, seals it, and walks to the local inn where the stagecoach stops every morning. She pays the innkeeper to place her letter in the mail bag. Days later, in a bustling London street, her brother receives it. He breaks the seal, reads her words, and for a moment he is home again. This was the power of postal roads. They stitched together families, towns, even countries. In America, the story was similar. Colonies grew, cities expanded, and the need for connection became urgent. Stagecoaches thundered across dirt roads, carrying not just letters but newspapers, news of politics, and rumors of revolution. Riders wore dust-stained coats, their boots heavy with mud. At night, by lantern light, postmasters sorted sacks of mail, calling out names as eager hands reached forward. Picture Philadelphia in the late 1700s. A printer named Benjamin Franklin, who would one day help shape a nation, also worked as a postmaster. He understood the value of communication, of letters traveling smoothly and swiftly. Under his guidance, postal routes expanded, connecting colonies like never before. A letter written in Boston could reach Virginia more reliably than ever before, binding people together across distance. Think of the sound. Wheels clattering, horses pounding, voices shouting at way stations, bells ringing as coaches entered towns. Letters moved with this rhythm. But stagecoaches were not only about speed. They were also symbols. To see one arriving was to see connection itself. News, goods, people, and words arriving together. Let's pause and imagine a single letter traveling through this system. It begins in Paris, where a young man writes to his sweetheart in Lyon. He chooses each word with care, dipping his quill in ink, blotting the page gently. When finished, he folds it, seals it with wax, and hands it to a coach driver. The letter rides through villages, past vineyards, across bridges. Rain patters on the coach roof at night. In the morning, mist rises from the fields. Finally, days later, it reaches Lyon, where a servant delivers it to the young woman's door. She opens it, her heart racing, her eyes moving quickly over the words. A smile spreads across her face. All the while, the letter has been safe inside the system of roads, horses, and coaches, a miracle of organization for its time. Of course, the journey was not always smooth. Roads were rough, weather harsh. Coaches tipped, wheels broke, rivers flooded. Bandits sometimes lurked on lonely stretches, hoping to steal valuables. Drivers had to be brave, passengers patient, and letters resilient. Yet despite the dangers, the mail went on. Day after day, year after year, stagecoaches carried the lifeblood of communication. By the 1800s, many countries had postal networks stretching wide. In Europe, post horns announced the arrival of the coach, their bright notes echoing across valleys and towns. In America, the frontier expanded westward, and mail routes followed, stretching further into unknown lands. Imagine the quiet joy of hearing the post horn in a village. Children run to see the coach arrive, dogs bark, villagers gather. Among the sacks of mail, one letter might carry news of a son fighting in a distant war, another might announce the birth of a baby, another might contain bills and contracts. Each letter, whether joyful or sorrowful, was a bridge between people. For thousands of years, messages had traveled by feet, hooves, sails, or wheels. Slowly but surely they crossed deserts, rivers, mountains, and seas. But in the 1800s, humanity unlocked something extraordinary. A way to send words faster than any horse could gallop, faster than any ship could sail, faster even than the wind. This was the age of the telegraph. Close your eyes and imagine the year 1844. A small crowd gathers in Washington, D.C. In a quiet room, a man named Samuel Morse adjusts a strange device made of wires, magnets, and a little lever. He presses it down. Click, click, click. Across the room, a strip of paper begins to move, punched with dots and dashes. Those tiny marks are letters, and those letters form words. "What hath God wrought?" the message reads. A sentence has traveled instantly, miles away, without horse, without coach, without sail. The crowd gasps. Some shake their heads in disbelief. But it is real. A new era has begun. Before the telegraph, messages had been limited by the speed of physical travel. A letter from New York to New Orleans might take weeks. News from London to Paris still needed horses and ships. Now, with a wire strung between cities, messages could fly almost at the speed of thought. Picture a telegraph line stretching across the countryside. Wooden poles march into the distance, thin wires humming softly in the breeze. Along train tracks and roads, these lines become the veins of a new nervous system, carrying pulses of electricity. Each pulse is a dot or a dash, each dot or dash a piece of code, and together they form words. At first, only trained operators could read this code. Imagine sitting in a telegraph office. The room is quiet except for the sharp, rhythmic clicks of the receiver. An operator listens, pencil in hand, as the code flows in. Dot dash dash dot. His hand moves quickly, writing out letters, forming words. When the message is finished, he stands, takes the slip of paper, and delivers it to its waiting recipient. For the person receiving it, it feels like magic. Minutes ago, a friend hundreds of miles away had a thought. Now that thought is here in black ink, ready to be read. The telegraph did not just change personal communication, it changed the world. Merchants could now check prices in distant markets before sending goods. Governments could relay orders to faraway generals with unprecedented speed. Newspapers received breaking news from other cities the same day it happened. Wars, elections, trade, all moved faster, sharper, more connected. Imagine a battlefield in the mid-1800s. Smoke rises, cannons boom, soldiers march. Behind the lines, an officer bends over a small tent where a telegraph machine clicks steadily. Messages flash back and forth between headquarters and the field. Decisions that once took days now take minutes. The telegraph has made war itself faster. Meanwhile, across oceans, engineers dreamed of something even bolder: sending messages underwater. Picture a great ship at sea in the 1850s, lowering a thick cable into the Atlantic depths. The waves crash, the cable groans, sailors strain to steady it. For weeks they work, battling storms and setbacks. Finally, the line is laid, from Europe to America. When the first transatlantic telegraph message travels across it, the world seems suddenly smaller. A message that once took a ship weeks to carry can now cross the ocean in minutes. Imagine the wonder. A businessman in London can ask about cotton prices in New York and receive an answer the same day. A queen can send greetings to a president across the sea without waiting for a courier. The continents, once separated by endless waves, are now connected by invisible sparks. But the telegraph was not only for leaders and merchants. Ordinary people began to use it too. A farmer might send a message to his son in the city: "Mother ill. Come home soon." A young man might wire a proposal: "Will you marry me?" Families sent birth announcements, death notices, invitations, congratulations. All in short, clipped words because each word cost money. Think of the sound: click, click, dash, dot, click. A language of its own, a song of sparks and silence. Of course, the telegraph had its limits. Messages were short, often urgent, sometimes blunt. It lacked the warmth of a long letter, the personal touch of handwriting. Yet in its speed, it offered something entirely new. It gave people the power to be almost present, even when far away. Let us imagine for a moment a message traveling down a wire. It begins in Boston, tapped out by an operator late at night. The dots and dashes leap into the wire, racing along poles and cables, humming through forests, over rivers, past towns lit by oil lamps. Hours later, in Chicago, the clicks emerge, forming words once again. A person waiting anxiously receives the note, reads it, and breathes a sigh of relief, or perhaps sheds a tear. The wire has carried not just signals but feelings across half a continent. By the late 1800s, telegraph offices were everywhere. Picture a small town in the American West. A dusty street, wooden storefronts, the clang of a blacksmith's hammer. In the corner, a small building with a sign, Western Union Telegraph Office. Inside, an operator sits by his machine, sending and receiving news. Cowboys, miners, settlers, and travelers step inside, dictating short notes to loved ones back east. The operator taps them out, and within hours the messages arrive hundreds of miles away. The world is moving faster.